May I ask? I was wondering actually how you all decided what material was going to be included in each volume that you created, each one of these volumes.
I don't think we used anything more than our own background as teachers to decide. We were really throwing a block up in terms of typical curriculum. So we had to make a lot of very arbitrary decisions. And a lot of that was just Mickey and Dwayne and I sitting around talking and saying, well, this would fit here and this would fit there and that kind of thing. There weren't many guidelines because there was no foundation for this, like this. These books were coming out. They weren't quite out yet, though. I don't think Chapman's... When that came out, these weren't quite out yet.
I think Hubbard's were first, and they came out in 81.
Okay.
1981.
Laura Chapman picked up a lot of what we were doing, and she has some... There's some DBAE kinds of threads in this book, but there aren't too many in Guy's book. There's some, but not too much. Not as much as Laura picked up. But no one else was doing this, so we were really creating something that there was no foundation for. So we just arbitrarily said, well, this belongs in the 3rd grade. This goes in the 8th grade. Just whatever we thought we should do.
There were no standards back then.
There were no standards.
What do you think about standards? Like teaching national standards, state standards?
I think the standards have gotten in the way of good education in a lot of ways. But a lot of the rationale behind the standards I can support. But when they became arbitrary rules that people did or didn't do it, then it lost its value, I think, because I shouldn't say it lost its value. It corrupted its value. It changed the way that the standards are being used. Right now, for instance, Bloomington, which has probably one of the best school districts in the second half of the state, is under pressure because we're not meeting the standards across the board. And that's crazy because you can only do that so much. I mean, we have exceeded the standards almost every year up to this point in time. And then this year they say we're falling behind. And everybody's arguing about it. I say everybody, but people that are knowledgeable about the schools and concerned about the schools and so forth, as much of this building has to be, obviously. But the use of the standard to punish schools is a corruption that should never be there. And a lot of the standards are quite realistic. Some of them are a little bit not, but most of them are. And teachers should be able to, using the standard as an ideal sort of kind of thing, move their students toward that level. You want to say something about that?
No, I agree. I mean,
I'm just curious, being sort of an academic in training, I guess, do you feel that you have to maintain a sort of detachment from your work and your ideas as you send them out there into the universe?
that's an interesting question.
That's a good question. I think most of us write, well, part of what we write comes from within ourselves. Obviously, it has to have a foundation that has validity in the field and so on. So you have to make those things fit. But to the extent that you're investing yourself in the writing, it's pretty hard to say I'm going to stand up and be objective. You invest, and you worry when that investment isn't recognized by other people.
I'm just curious about how it would feel to spend so much time working on something like DBAE, or putting these ideas out there and seeing them be criticized and basically dropped over time, and how does one sort of negotiate that, I guess, from a personal level, but also on a professional level? I mean, you made the comment that you start criticizing the work yourself, so maybe that's one way that you chose to deal with it. Was
Yeah,
that.
you're describing a very tough situation. I have spent time grousing around and saying, I wish I had gotten involved with this. But to the extent that you see your own ideas being challenged and so on, you can accept that up to a point. When it goes beyond that, when it becomes really defamational kind of thing, then you get angry, and then you have to sit back and take a pretty hard-nosed look at what's going on and why it's going on, and you back off sometimes. You know. This little booklet that I mentioned, I argued this little booklet every time Mickey and Dwayne and I got together. And I lost most of those arguments because Dwayne was coming on from the strictly studio point of view. And it was interesting. I mean, Dwayne's a good friend, and we luckily the three of us got along quite famously. But sometimes you lose an argument like that, and you worry about it because you realize, as this may take its form in ultimately a national curriculum, somebody's going to suffer to the extent that you don't feel that something important is being recognized in you. But you have to give that up so very often. And I know we spent a lot of, Mickey and Dwayne and I, we're all very good friends, and we remain so to this day. But we each of us invested enough energy into DBAE, and we hated to see what happened. We hated to see the Getty pull out of it, and a lot of school districts have just turned their back on it. Others have remained very actively DBAE during this time. But I really believe DBAE has a legitimacy about itself, which many art programs do not have. Many programs do not have a foundation which is stated, as in the booklet that you looked at before. And it's too bad in a way, because a sort of foundationless subject matter is always under challenge in the public school, as it should be. So for a school district to turn its back on DBAE and say, well, we're going to do what we've always done in the past, I think is a mistake. And I think it's too bad that districts let that happen. But I'm not saying that everybody should be doing DBAE necessarily either. I mean, something in between now, something that takes good ideas from all of those sources and puts them together.